enforcement agents have the mammoth task of containing the rise in counterfeit goods. Criminals are taking advantage of the health crisis brought about by COVID-19. And according to intellectual property and commercial services law firm, that's Adams & Adams, criminals are devising new strategies to avoid detection. Now, this is despite restrictions being placed on the movement for people as well as goods. But the head of the Adams & Adams anti-counterfeit unit, that's Mr. Godfrey Budeli, joins me now to unpack this conversation even further. Mr. Budeli, thank you for your time and a warm good morning to you. This is, however, quite discouraging. It seems that there's an increase that you're detecting here in terms of criminals getting a lot more creative when it comes to, counterfeit goods, particularly when we look at, COVID-19 related goods, whether it's PPE, whether it's vaccines, you name it. Take me through, what this picture looks like.
Yes, good morning to you and good morning to the listeners. Yes, you are quite right. Obviously, we all know that counterfeit goods trade it's a big business. Of course, counterfeiters are relentless in trying to actually penetrate each and every single market. They try to actually devise all these mechanisms to try and avoid the detection and the detention of these goods at the borders. This is precisely because the majority of these counterfeit goods emanate from Asia, particularly in China. They come through either sea freight or air freight. And of course, when they get to the borders, our customs officers or border enforcement officials have got to be ready to try and actually inspect this consignment and try and detain as many consignment as possible.
Right.
Those are bearing particularly branded goods. But we must actually take into account that there are a large number of containers that are coming through, particularly through Durban Harbour, which is the largest port in the country. And it is near impossible task to actually inspect and try and detain each and every consignment.
Right.
Statistically, I think less than 5% of the consignment are actually physically checked. And therefore, that means over 90% of the consignments are coming through unchecked. And obviously, that is a concern. But globally, the stats indicates that less than 3% of the consignment actually get checked.
Mr. Budeli, if I may just come in there as well. I mean, when we talk about some of the creative strategies with which criminals are using to either transport these counterfeits goods or continue selling them, what are we talking about here? What are we looking at? What exactly are they doing?
All right. Before COVID, obviously the containers were coming through as normal. But during COVID, because of the implementation of the restrictions on border measures, as well as restrictions on travel, either for goods or for passengers, we saw some goods coming through chartered flights. And of course, you know that chartered flights usually doesn't necessarily land at a big airports like your or Tambo. They usually go to smaller airports where customs inspection mechanisms are much more relaxed.
Right.
And usually these chartered aircrafts will arrive in the dawn of night, when people are actually sort of usually relaxed in terms of actually enforcing the laws. So those are the type of things that we observed during COVID. And of course, they were quite concerning because the type of goods that would be brought through would have been PPE. And then later on, we saw that there were counterfeit vaccines that were found at a warehouse in Johannesburg.
Now, with that being said, I mean, we're also seeing that, consumers obviously who are purchasing via e-commerce are falling victim. We're seeing that the health sector is falling victim. A lot of businesses are falling victim to this criminal activity. Before I let you go, what would then be your advice in terms of brand holders? What can they do about this? Because there are a lot of losses here in Kyoto, I can imagine.
You're absolutely right. So of course, the sale of counterfeit goods online, it has increased, and it is quite an important thing for consumers to try and actually move away from buying branded goods online. because obviously you can't check the origin of those goods. And secondly, particularly when it comes to pharmaceuticals, particularly where you find that they are either Schedule 3 or 4, which you only can get with a script from the doctor.
Right.
You cannot buy medication online. That's very, very important. If you find medication online which you can only get through a script, then you know that that 99% chance that you are not going to get an original medication. And with medication, it's very important that you actually get it through the appropriate channels.
Right.
Because the medications that you get that are counterfeit, they are either completely ineffective or they are lethal. We have had that there are many people who have died before
Right.
of using counterfeit medication. So the issue of pharmaceuticals online, it's a no-go zone area.
All right, Mr. Budeli, unfortunately, due to time, I have to let it go and leave it right there. But thank you so much for talking to us today. Godfrey Budeli from Adams & Adams talking to us about being vigilant of counterfeit goods.